I pledge my life and honor to the NerdsWatch for this night and all the nights to come.
Hey guys, it's Josiah, aka Mahler67, and I am back finally after nearly a year plus time with my co-host,
Your Lord Austin Burkhardt.
Lord Austin Burkhardt, and we're back, of course, since Game of Thrones is back with the NerdWatch. I'm so happy to finally be back. I don't know how long you've been waiting, other than
595 days. I think that's exactly the total that we've seen. Wow. I know I've seen a bunch of memes with that. Most of the time it was, like I just saw a meme not even 2 hours ago, and it was Robert Baratheon like standing up with a cup, and he's like, it's been 595 days. I have to pee. Let's start this season.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Yeah. So. No, luckily enough, I've been keeping my hype for the season down really well to the point where I kind of like forgot about it for a little bit. And then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, it starts this week. Oh, fantastic. I'm happy.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I'm glad that HBO kind of just didn't like they didn't come out with like a season trailer until like 2 months ago. Like, so the hype wasn't like most other hypes where like, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to wait like a year and a half for this. Mm-hmm. And it was more of like, oh wow, it's been a year and a half now. So I'm pretty happy that HBO kind of kept that under wraps for a while.
Yeah, and I subsidized my like need of Game of Thrones with the books. Like I got the new History of Fire or the Blood and Fire, the Targaryen line, and so I got to go through that. So, well, before we begin, for anyone who is new to this podcast, big warning right now. This is a spoiler cast. Like we are not going to hold back. We're going to talk about what's happening. We're going to break down the episode, and we're going to talk about how we felt about the stuff, as well as what we think is going to happen when we move on. So you have been warned. If you haven't seen the episode yet, pause this and go watch the episode on HBO Now, or however you do that, Hulu, or however you handle that before you dive into this.
Robb Stark dies in the Red Wedding.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they're listening to this at this point, they probably already know that.
Well, if you haven't, I'm so sorry, but no, you should go and watch Game of Thrones. It's a really good show. And yeah, let's start the season 8, the final season of the Game of Thrones.
At least this time, like we don't know if we know that they're going to do a prequel, but we don't know what it's going to be called. So Austin, first off, first thoughts of the episodes, as we always do. I want your thoughts all together. If you cram it all together, not going into super big detail, but just enough to get your feelings across. How you feel about this episode?
You know, I have some really mixed feelings of this episode. I feel like it was just a drag fill episode. Like it didn't really have too much in it to like where I was completely satisfied. I was like, yeah, it's back, baby. It was more of like a lot of things happened that are kind of things you've wanted to see, but nothing too big, because right now we're all hyped up from last season, you know, because the season finale was, you know, huge, watching a dragon melt the wall and, you know, completely the whole Nightwalker army is like assembling out of the north finally. The only thing that I actually had a problem at the beginning of the show is the new theme. Like,
you mean the new intro?
Yeah, like I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Like I liked it, but I didn't like the whole sun thing. I kind of felt like the graphics on the sun was kind of just bland. Like it wasn't really like well done like I remember, because like, you know, it had like the sketchings and the etches of like, you know, the dragon and the stag and all that, and they were all fighting, and I really like that. And then I see this one and I'm like, wow, this is kind of bare bones, and they kind of like go in depth with more of the houses instead of just like showing the houses like come up moving to another house. So that kind of tells me, hey, we're only going to be staying at like a couple of these places for this series to end, which I'm pretty happy about. But yeah, overall, my first initial thing is there was a couple things that we'll get into actually here that will show that I was still excited. I'm still excited, and I can't wait for the end of the show. So, what about your first official thoughts?
All right. So my first official thoughts. I expected this for the first episode. I expected a lot of reunion. I went into it with all my friends. I watched it with a bunch of my friends from the church I hang out with, and I was already in the thought process. It's just going to be a reunion episode, very similar to how the first episode was, except in the first episode they had to introduce the characters. Now this time, they don't have to introduce anyone. You know all the crap that they've been through, and you know how they feel about the people, and you just get to see them for the first time. So I like that parallel, and they definitely mention it after the episode, like when they do that behind the scenes with the writers, where they state that this episode was supposed to be a kind of parallel to the first episode. It's fine. When it comes to the opening, I'm the exact opposite. I love the change in the opening, because what I think it's going to do is every episode, it's going to change. Instead of like in normally it was every season, it would change a little bit. Now it's going to be every episode. Because when you see like those panels flipping, I'm like, that's where the dead, like the the dead army is.
Where he's marching.
Yeah.
Because it's the ice.
It makes me feel like Winterfell is definitely going to fall, and then it's just going to keep going down. And it's like you said, they only really showed 3 of the houses because there's no other houses to really care about at this point. Like, you don't have to care about any of the Martells. They're all basically gone. Like, yeah, they do matter in this world, but they have no point currently. And then, the Greyjoys are basically in Winterfell, and I mean, not Winterfell, King's Landing. There's no real point to it. So I'm okay with it, and I like how it zoomed into the Winterfell and like started going around, because I think whenever the White Walkers take over it, they're going to change the atmosphere to be like dark and gloomy to like show that it's been taken over. So I'm actually excited for that. I think the person who made that, like who modeled that, rendered it and everything, is a god of some sort, and he has blessed us in some way. So that's my personal thought process on both the the first thoughts and the opening. So let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes of what we do. Austin, let's go ahead and break down. The first thing we need to talk about is Winterfell. You want to take us through the very start of the episode with the triumphant entry of Jon and Daenerys.
Okay, so I will say this is one of the best pieces of cinematic using sounds to show a very big army, because the first thing you hear, you just hear ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. Like you can hear the armor and everyone stomping. Yeah. But that like raised the bar. Like when you heard that and then hear it coming into Winterfell, like when they show that shot. But what I liked is after the episode, they do on HBO Now, they do like those, like the directors talk about shot for shot. And they brought up, they said, what's really cool is the first thing you see is this little boy like moving through the crowd because something big is happening in Winterfell and he can't see. And Arya is there, and Arya steps beside him because she remembers when back in episode 1 when Robert Baratheon and the whole Lannister army showed up to Winterfell, and she was like had like the helmet on and everything, like they were talking about that, and climbing the tree. But cinematically, I felt that was really well done because Arya was the main focus of those people coming in. And I think people are going to get sidetracked by that because I feel that Arya was the main focus. We didn't really need to know anything else because Arya is seeing some of the characters that, one, she's never seen, or two, she hasn't seen in a long time. Like, oh my gosh, we'll talk about this a little bit later. But, some of the people that she's seen was Jon and Daenerys. And then we got to see Tyrion and Daenerys. And she finally got to see Gendry. So now she knows he's alive and he's well and he's doing Gendry stuff, like always, blacksmithing, and the Hound, which, you know, the last time Arya talked to the Hound, she left him for dead. So, robbed him first, because she states that later. So, but yeah, so the first initial part of Winterfell is watching, you know, these people enter, and you can tell that, like, the North people are kind of like, yeah, we're kind of intimidated a little bit. We don't really trust this person because she just brought, like, I'm trying to think how many she still has left after the whole Marina thing, but I think
I mean enough to scare them. Like, you see how many that's there.
I think the original number was like 8,000 Unsullied, and that was the original number she bought all those for. But like, I don't know what's left. So, but she's got a huge army because she also has the. I always butcher this. Thank you. I always butcher that for some odd reason. So we have a lot of armies gathering in Winterfell. So we'll see what happens.
But one thing I want to bring up about the entry of Winterfell is I of course like listen to the books and like care a lot about that. And I remember when, in the books, I think it was Aegon Targaryen when he first took over the world. I mean, Westeros. When he went to the north, they were told, like, hey, you shouldn't come in on your dragons because that's going to be shown as arrogant and, that's not going to be shown well. And so her coming in on a horse, I think, was kind of like mimicking that same approach where it's like, if I rode in on a dragon, I would be seen as a conqueror and not as this, like, person who should be trusted. But then, like, I was thinking that as the dragon started swooping in, I'm like, okay, now it became a power play, like, just to kind of show off what she has. But I absolutely love the characters' faces whenever they, like, saw it, because they were just like, oh my gosh, just dragons, they're real. And because none of these people at this time has ever seen a dragon, period.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was really cool to see, like, Arya's face kind of go from like fearful to like excited and so on and so forth. So, all right, Austin, since we did Winterfell and the dragons at Winterfell, let's go ahead and talk about Bran a little bit. Bran in general, we can just what we'll do is we'll go over like certain characters and their interactions and kind of like what you started to do with Arya. We'll go into more detail there. But let's talk about Bran. What was your feelings on Bran this episode?
Let's just say Bran still has the same tone of last season. You can kind of tell that he's learned a lot. He's not just like, hey, I'm Bran Stark. It's more of like, we need to tell him now. This needs to happen. We need to do this. Like, I kind of feel that he's kind of robotic. He doesn't have a lot of feelings. But I think the best part that I loved of Bran Stark that I truly loved was when Jon met him, because he come right up and he just kissed him like on his forehead, and he was so happy to know, and he was like, "You're not a boy anymore. You're a man." Yeah. And I forget what Bran said. I forget.
He's like, "Well, almost." That's what it was. So I like the interaction that he had with Jon, and you know, Bran in this episode was like the funniest thing ever. Because, like, I kind of feel like Bran was like that guy that, like, sits in the corner, and then when someone notices him, they're like, Bran! You know? Just that creepy guy down the courtyard just staring at people.
Yeah, and he, like, you know, almost every character in the show, Bran was there, like, staring at them, you know, well, so.
I think, like, personally, with me when it comes to Bran in this whole episode, and just this episode alone, I'm like, if he keeps like this for the rest of the series, he's going like jump up in my favorite character approaches like really quickly. But I think this is parallel to Bran, what he is and what he will be from now on. Just how he observes people. And he doesn't talk to people unless they talk to him first. Kind of like how the Three-Eyed Raven did the same. He observed people and he never talked to anyone because no one knew he was watching them. But now you have the Three-Eyed Raven there watching him, watching people, and people are aware of it. So that's the one thing I wanted to point out about Bran is just how kind of like that parallel in that way. So let's see. Who else does Bran interact with? Let's hold off on the ending of it till the end so we can talk through that one.
I think that we should hold off on the other one where Bran and Sam talk. I think we could bring up Sam a little bit later.
Yeah.
I think we need to hit someone else because Bran and Sam actually is a big key point of what happens in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should move actually to the one that is kind of bugging a lot of us, and it's Sansa.
Yeah, Sansa, yeah.
So here's the thing. Like, initially, what are you thinking right now? Because Sansa's a totally different character, after the whole Ramsay Bolton thing. So what is your first initial take on how she reacted when Daenerys and them showed up?
She acted exactly how I figured she would react. She would react cold to Daenerys and almost like sad to Jon. Like, I can't believe you did it, but she understands. Like, there's no doubt in her head that she understands why Jon did it, but she definitely has that thought process of it's like, you did it irrationally because you thought, oh, this will protect people. Unfortunately, the Northmen are not just people who just accept their leadership as it is. They're basically wild men. They're the wildlings, just a little more civilized. And she understands that, but Jon just is like, listen, I'm just trying to do what needs to happen for us to live. The same way he had to do what he needed to do to let the Night's Watch lived. And it ultimately got him killed. But like, those people survived to this point, at least. And Tyrion sees that, and he even said, like, by the end of this, if anyone lives, they have Jon Snow to thank. So Sansa definitely, like, I don't know, like, her interaction, like, going on with Daenerys had me kind of like, it's exactly how I thought it would be with just them both being cold to each other. Like, whenever she's just like, I didn't expect to feed all these people. What did you expect of me? Like, we can't do this. Winterfell can't do this. And then she's like, what do dragons eat? And then Daenerys very slyly says, whatever they want. And that was obviously like a slight to her to be like, I can destroy you if I choose to. Don't act like you're higher above me. And Game of Thrones at this point is becoming a game of pride just between different people. And the most humble person, who is Jon, just caught in between loving everyone, is hilarious to me.
The only thing that really shocked me was, is it Lady Mormont? She like stood up and said something finally. She's like, you came back, she told Jon, like, called him out, was like, you left and you came back like a different person.
Yeah, you left the King of the North and you came back whatever you are now.
And I don't get Sansa with that, because there is that point where, Sansa and Jon are talking. Jon is like, look, she'll be a good queen for us. And even Daenerys says, later with Jon when they're talking, before the whole little Aladdin spiel, we'll talk about that. But the part is like Daenerys says, she needs to know that I'm her queen. And that's what Jon's like, kind of sweets talk Sansa, and is like, hey, she'll be a good queen. We will be. And the response that Sansa gives Jon is like, did you bend the knee to save the North? Or did you bend the knee because you love her? And then we get dropped off on that cliffhanger, of course, that's Game of Thrones style, where they're just like, well, you're going to be in the dark with that one. So I don't know. I feel like Sansa, I think her initial reaction is truthful. She's trying to be a stronger woman. And when, Jon brings this whole army that's very intimidating to the North, and sometimes Daenerys has, how I feel about Daenerys is she has the qualities of a Mad King sometimes, but she's also very, very heartfelt. She can be mean, but she can also be really, really merciful. And I just feel that, Sansa is just a little on guard, and that's actually perfectly normal. I would be the same way if I owned a kingdom and someone showed up and was like, hey, we're going to be with these people. So I understand where she's coming from. So yeah.
I don't know. I think Sansa has definitely embodied the Stark name to the complete extent, which is good, which is fine. Definitely by the end of this series, if there's anyone in Winterfell, I feel like it's going to be Sansa. She has attained that throne, and she's definitely going to hold that, in my opinion. If they kill her off, it's only because Winterfell is not going to be a thing by the end of the season. I don't know. But I don't know. The problem I have with Sansa's character is just she has kind of grew the most of everyone, but her experiences has turned her into kind of like a jerk. Just because she can't have a normal conversation without bringing up a slight. Even when it came to Tyrion, whenever she met him on the bridge, they talked and all this stuff, and they basically just were there doing quips at each other. And then she ends oh, they used to think you were the cleverest person in the world. And then she left. And it's that was that really necessary? You just basically bewildered him. And it's funny to me because she kind of belittled him for trusting in his siblings when she herself is in the same situation and trusting with her siblings. And so that's a parallel that I personally got really frustrated with, because I'm okay, I get, you don't trust the Lannisters at all, but you also have to understand that the Lannisters have a hard time trusting the Starks in the same way. But I mean, she's right for how she's thinking, because we'll see whenever we go to King's Landing. But it's still one of those things that's just there's no need for you to be such a jerk all the time. You can show some skin, some naturalness to you. And that's my problem. So speaking of Tyrion, let's jump to Tyrion's interactions, a couple of them. Let's see. The first interaction we get is him and Varys, which I was honestly, after that scene with how short it was, I kind of said out loud, I'm wow, that was 2 minutes of IO we could have used somewhere else. It wasn't needed. I
think it was just trying to bring in people a little bit, maybe people that are introducing people to the show, that they realize that there's comedy in it. Because that joke, because the joke that he states is he's something about you don't have any balls, and Daenerys is I don't get why, you tell jokes. You don't like people talking about midgets and stuff like that, joking about your height. But you don't talk about people that, don't have any junk. And he's well, because I have balls. And I was just okay, no, let's move on. It was very forgivable. Yeah, forgettable.
It felt like they were trying to give Tyrion a quip to say there. And Varys had no gripes for that. But I mean, he kind of walked himself into that, honestly. But I was kind of okay, I would have been okay with them outing that little bit, just to give a little more time with the ending, in my opinion. But when it came to Tyrion in the meeting room, honestly, the whole meeting room could be summed up as simply as everyone oh no, the White Walker's coming, but Jon's not our king no more. Karstark, you go... no, not the Karstark, the Umbers. He's Umber kid, new lord. Go home and collect your people and come back, and we will re-advise them later. And then the little kid runs off. And then it basically just sets up a whole flare in the room about, was Jon now? Is he a lord? Is he anything? What's the point? Everyone was basically upset. And like you said, Lyanna Mormont stands up and kind of gives her little spiel about Jon not being the king anymore. And we find out later that does affect with the Glovers, who choose to basically hide out in their own keep, saying hey, good luck to you guys, but we're going to follow the king of the North, not this woman, and basically just turn their back on them, which I was very upset about. But Tyrion stands up and kind of boasts in front of the whole kind of yeah, the Lannisters army coming to help us. And everyone was kind of uproar. What did you think about that? You think that was a smart, bad, okay?
I think he should have just kept his mouth shut. Now, what he should have said, what he said, without the whole, hey, the Lannister army showing up. because the thing is let's be real. He knows the track record of it, of like Cersei and stuff. And I think that I would wait until I see soldiers coming, which I don't want to get into too much about this because I do have a theory on this and I don't want to kind of ruin it with people. So, but overall, I think Tyrion was just trying to be like trying to defend his queen's honor by being a true hand to her and standing up for what she believes in and what Jon believes in and what he believes in full-heartedly. So I think he did the right thing, but I think that's maybe mentioning the Lannisters that murdered the Starks. It's kind of hard, especially, the whole segment is, the North remembers. Yeah. And, they still remember. So.
Yeah. And it's still one of the, I don't know, I just feel like, I think Tyrion did the right thing with mentioning it. I think everyone's still kind of like gropey about it, but I think they would have been a little more up at ease if the Lannister army just appeared and they're like, oh, by the way, we got them to help us. So I think it's smart for him to say that. But anyways, I honestly feel like that kind of wraps up Tyrion more or less. Like he had the interaction with Varys and Davos and Varys.
Yeah, I would actually like to bring up that.
Okay, talk about it.
Just because you can't let my main man slip by. I'm a huge fan of Davos. He's my favorite character on Game of Thrones, but he actually is trying to help Tyrion here. I think Davos has really realized that he really likes Tyrion. He's good for, them. And I remember their first interaction when, Davos introduced, Jon Snow. And he's like, because Daenerys was like, blah, 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 the unburned, the queen of this and blah. And then, Davos is like, this is Jon Snow, the king of Winterfell. That's it, and
he's just very simple about it. He's just like, here's what he
watching tears. But Tyrion stands up, and I think that's when Davos realizes during that meeting room time where Jon and Daenerys first met, Tyrion stands up for Jon and was like, this man, I knew him on the wall. He was a really nice guy. He's helped out. He's very honest and humble. So I think Davos realizes that Tyrion is a very warm-hearted guy that's trying to help. And he's like, look, the North men, they're kind of not really into this whole outsider thing. So Davos kind of comes up with a proposal to figure out how we're going to get the North to want Daenerys Targaryen. And really, that was it. That's all that we got. He didn't really go too much into detail on what the proposal was or anything like that. But Tyrion talks about how, he didn't really do too much this episode. Just kind of just talked, had some key points that they had to talk about and set up some of the story. But the thing that I think the most that Tyrion said is Tyrion's like, well, they are a cute couple. And Davos says, most likely things don't always work out. And that set up a whole new thing, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Which, I think what Davos said is now what is the huge conflict that's going to happen here soon. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, you say we'll talk about it later. I say, why not just talk about it now? Let's go ahead and talk about Jon and Daenerys. Let's talk about Jon in general and Daenerys together, that single scene. Because that scene kind of offered a lot of stuff for a lot of different reasons that me, as being someone who reads the books and heavily invested in the Game of Thrones, Ice and Fire history and everything of that sort, found as kind of a red flag, but then kind of let it go the more I thought about it. So, whenever you see them together, I'm constantly they look like a giddy couple. As they walk, all I could think to myself is just she's spitting and he's just smiling all over the place. It's obvious. No one could, they couldn't hide it if they wanted to. But whenever they went to the dragons and the dragons aren't eating very much, I think it's very interesting about that because they make the statement, like she makes the statement, like they don't like the North. They don't like being in the North. And this whole time, like ever since we found out that Jon is Rhaegar Targaryen and everything, well, Aegon Targaryen, I mean, there's like the whole thought of like, oh, he's going to be the new king of like the world and everything. He's going to sit the Iron Throne. And my biggest problem with that is maybe that's where dragons go, but he's always been partial to the North. And if the dragons don't like the North, he definitely has more Stark blood in him than dragon blood. And so, I don't know. I think they were possibly like hinting at the idea of Jon not going south to King's Landing. Because even though the dragons hate it, Jon has mentioned multiple times that, you know, he doesn't like the snow and everything, but he likes the North. But then they go on a magic dragon ride of romance, flying around.
A whole new dragon.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things.
That's how I felt.
They mentioned it in the after video where it's like, you know, that should have been a tell that only Targaryens rode dragons. Like, yeah, definitely. That was my first thing that I got frustrated about. And I'm like, what? Why Daenerys says this? If she believed that she's the only Targaryen, she wouldn't have him ride a dragon knowing that he would be bucked off and killed. But then it thought to me, you know, she's not super learned. It's not like she's reading books about Targaryen history other than what people have told her. So she probably doesn't know that there's not many dragon riders. Well, there wasn't any dragon riders for almost like 300 some years other than the Targaryens. So it made a little more sense the more I thought about it. Like, yeah, she wouldn't know as much as Jon wouldn't know. So I'm okay with that in all sense of it. But I don't know. And then they like get off and they have their little thing.
with the waterfall.
With the waterfall.
They have like this romantic kiss and, you know, them talking like, ooh, buttercup. What I like to call the honeymoon phase of couples.
I don't think it's just you. I think that's everyone in general.
Some people don't like when I say that, but it's true. You know, when you fall in love with someone or when you start dating someone, I call this phase the honeymoon phase, where they can't get enough of each other. They're always like doing Eskimo kisses, and they're just like, "Oh, I can't stay away from you, oh Jon Snow. You know nothing." The dragon scenes. I just want to talk about this for a sec. Mm-hmm. I was just within maybe the first 10 seconds of them riding the dragons, I just wanted it to stop. The reasoning why is I think that I felt like when I was watching it, it was like, oh my gosh, can we stop now? Because it kind of dragged on a little bit longer than I wanted it to. I get the whole, but it made me feel like I was watching Aladdin, the whole new world magic carpet ride thing. So I understand where they were going with it, because I think, you know, they're alluding to that Jon's going to be riding the dragon. You know, he kind of is learning now, you know, because she states before she gets on, he's like, I don't know how to ride a dragon. She's like, no one does until you ride a dragon. Mm-hmm. So no instruction manual included.
Yeah.
But overall, that was pretty much Daenerys, really. Like, you know, there wasn't really anything of her in the episode except for her interaction with, you know, Sansa and, you know, just the whole thing of Winterfell.
Yeah.
So.
And we'll save her and Sam for the end of it, because that's huge and that's important, but we'll get to it at the end. So let's go ahead and talk about Arya, since we gone talked about Jon and the little kiss and Drogon the dragon just staring him down. That was hilarious in my eyes. But let's talk about Arya and her multiple reunions. You started touching on them. First one, Jon and her. How did you feel about Jon and Arya's reunion?
I'm going to tell you this. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to lie about this. I'm going to be completely honest. I shed a tear.
Oh, okay.
The reasoning why, and I loved that I thought of this when I first saw it, instead of me having to watch the extras here and then them saying it. I was like, I already knew this. You know, Arya and Jon have like a really good relationship. You know, we see, you know, in the first season where like Jon is like, loves Arya, gives her the needle little sword that she's still carrying. And the hug was very emotional, because I liked those two characters together because you knew that they both really loved each other, even though that Jon felt like an outcast because of how Catelyn Stark and some of the other people Winterfell looked at Jon being a bastard. And I loved Arya just it kind of felt like it was a nice reunion. It was very nice. Nothing like, hey, quick ribs. It was more of just
there were.
Yeah, but there wasn't like anything where it was like real put downs. It was more of just like he's proud of what Arya has become, even though he doesn't know about her crazy face stuff and how she fed Walter Frey, the other Freys.
Yeah, well, no one knows that yet, but I think Sansa would be happy. Jon would feel like he would understand like they should have died and they needed to die, but that wasn't the proper way of doing it. And she's such a opposite character to Jon now. Even though they started off as kind of similar characters, he was an outcast because he was like a bastard. She was an outcast because she was a tomboy whenever she was supposed to be a lady. They branched off into two different paths. It's like one chose to become a rogue and the other one chose to become a warrior. And it's just like, we can't meet in the middle no more. But two things I want to talk about Jon and Arya's interaction is one, Arya in the very beginning, sneaking up on him. He's like, "Whoa, how'd you sneak up on me?" I enjoyed that because it like kind of opens up to the thing. She's a stalker now. Like she can just stalk up to people and no one knows. It's fantastic. And then the other thing is the lewd hint throughout whenever she's like, she only cares. She's just trying to do what's best for the family. He's like, "Well, I'm her family too." And then she hugs him. He's like, "Yeah, don't forget that." I'm like, that's definitely going to be a like come up constantly. Is now that Jon at the end of the episode with that whole thing, that's going to be a character thing he has to work through. Is what side is he on? Is he a Stark or is he a Targaryen? Like which one is truly important? And that's nothing new to us, but that is something new for Jon, and that's something that he never had to deal with, but he gets to deal with again. So after Arya and Jon in their little time in the tree, let's go ahead and go down to the forge with Gendry.
Just one thing before we move forward with that. I like the interaction with the swords because the statement that Arya makes is Valyrian steel, too heavy for me. Later on, Arya, has that dagger that's got Valyrian in it. So, but I understand where that's going.
Well,
but,
she meant like a sword itself.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're moving to the forge.
The forge down there with Gendry, Arya, and the Hound. So first off, let's talk about Gendry and forging of dragon glass. What do you think about that?
Well, it looks like they got a lot of it because they talked about how many wagons were there and how much was in loading. And the guy actually alluded to, be very light and careful of this. We need as much as we can. You can tell that Gendry is forging all these dragon glass. And, I am a huge, my second favorite character is the Hound. Mm-hmm. And you come to find out that you would think the Hound would want something that's more proper of the Hound as a weapon, like a sword. And he actually asked for an axe. And I think that's showing a very key character change for the Hound. Because, when the Hound was, introduced into the newest season, one of the newer seasons that he was still alive, his weapon that he first had his hands on was an axe. And I think that he starting to really like that weapon more than just a sword. So, but what I want to talk about is the Hound and Arya reaction. I've been waiting for this for a long time. I was really happy how it happened.
Okay.
Because you would think the old Hound would have crushed her face in or tried to. This one's just like, oh, yeah, haven't seen you in a while. You've been kind of, you grew up. And she's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, you left me for dead the last time I saw. And she's like, I robbed you. And he's like, then I left you for dead. And he's like, you became one of those cold-hearted people, right? And she's like, just smiling. He's like, yeah, you have, and just walks away, which shows great character change for the Hound. He's becoming more of the person I think the Hound is, or the Hound's going to be. So those are great interactions. I know you can talk about the other interaction she has with Gendry. So
yeah, well, I mean, my quick thoughts about the Hound and Arya. That's kind of how I expected the interaction with, like, I would say, like, the A-list characters with B-rank characters. The Hound is definitely a B-rank character to me. So is Gendry. And so I expected it just to be like, oh yeah, you're here. That's cool. See you later. There's not going to be some super long interactions. And so it's what I expected, and that was fine. I kind of wanted the Hound to like smile a little bit, like at her, but that didn't happen, which is, it's fine. That was just a little thing that I wanted, but it didn't have no real commission there. Personally, with Gendry, I'm super excited with him forging Fireglass, because there's a side of me that really wants him to stumble upon the creation of Valyrian steel. Because there's a lot of like beliefs on how Valyrian steel is made and everything of that sort. And I think that he is going to stumble upon it since he's working with his dragon glass so much. And he has like multiple people with him who are like blessed essentially with some sort of magical-esque power. So you have like Arya and her faceless changing ability. You have Jon Snow with the Lord of Light bringing him back. You have Beric Dondarrion when he comes back, the same thing. And I just like, there's a sign that's like sooner or later Melisandre's going to turn up, or she'll never turn up. But if she turns up, I think she's going to be a cause of that. And I think learning how to make Valyrian steel is just something that I would like to know. Because there's a lot of speculations that it's like, oh, it has to do with dragonfire or things like that. But probably not. That's probably not how it is. I think that's how you make dragon glass, but not how you make Valyrian steel. There, it acquires magic in some way. But the interaction with Arya and Gendry was a little less than I actually wanted. I enjoyed their kind of quippiness, and of course the whole "my lady," and she's like, "Oh, don't call me Lady Stark," and he's like, "Sorry, me lady," and all that stuff. But it definitely kind of simulates that by the end of this, Gendry, if Gendry lives, and I predict that he's definitely going to live, if he lives. Well, I say definitely, but he's like a 80% chance to live in my book. If he lives, he's going to be ratified, and he'll be the new Baratheon, and that's how it's going to be. And so this whole time he's berating Arya about being a lady, and then he's going to become a lord out of nowhere, and he's going to have to deal with it, and it's just going to be a funny thing. But the interaction with them was very like calm, very simple for the two of them. Ultimately, with Arya kind of showing off her Valyrian dagger, and he kind of looked at it, and I love the end when it's just like, "You are a rich girl," and she's like, "I'm the only rich girl you know," and then she walked off, and I'm just like, that sounds like the beginning of some type of hip hop song. Just like, I'm the richest girl you know, just throwing Valyrian daggers out. So that interaction was pretty solid, pretty nice. And I think that's honestly the last interaction that Arya has with anyone in the series. Correct me if I'm wrong. No. But I think that's basically it. And so what we'll do now, let's go ahead and jump down to King's Landing and hop down there, and let's talk about this. We'll just talk about all encompassing, since not a lot happened here. We don't have to talk about individual people, just more or less Cersei, Erlong Grey, Greyjoy, and the other Greyjoys, and the Gold Company. I forgot about the Gold Company. So take us through, Austin. What happened and how it go?
Well, I know that we see all these fleets. We see that Theon's sister is still a prisoner to Aegon, or whatever his name is, Arion or Theon. I don't remember, but the Uncle Greyjoy. That's what I'll call him, Uncle Greyjoy. And he finally kind of persuades the queen, and he's like, "Look, I've done a lot for you." and I haven't got any of that booty.
Yeah, that was basically
just to be normal. That's exactly it, and he was like, look, man, I've done a whole bunch of this. And of course the mountain stands in front of him like, hey, don't even touch her. And then she kind of was like, you got to earn it. And he's like, have I not earned it? And what happens is your boy gets some. Mm-hmm. He finally does. And
disgusting.
We kind of,
I found it like super disgusting for some reason. I was like, okay, it's kind of gross.
Well, I just didn't like that. He was just like, how was I compared to the king, your fat king? And I was like, oh my gosh, please, can we stop now?
I mean, that's basically up his character. He's basically a jerkish and well-fighting Jack arrogant. Sparrow is how he's being played right now. And
someone should like super edit like some of his stuff and just put the Caribbean theme with them.
Yeah, that would be great.
So... But I think the biggest thing that stood out in King's Landing is Bronn.
Yeah, definitely. Bronn is the most important thing. And I think it will be the highest point of us talking about King's Landing. So, you want to go ahead and talk about what's happening with Bronn?
So, Bronn, is trying to get some booty. Always, he's just that guy that's like, well, I'm just a warrior, but, I'll get some of these chicks. So, he's got like 3 chicks in their bed, and they're talking about... I forget what they were talking about, but it was something that had to deal with a fire. I forget what it was.
Well, he was basically just talking up about how he shot at a dragon.
Oh, yeah. And the one lady was talking about one of the Lannisters that got injured by the fire, and he's like, oh, his face is half gone. And he's like, hey, can we, move on with this, And he finally is about to get it, and then creepy maester dude shows up, and he's like,
I think that's his name.
He's like, Bronn of Blackwater. And he was like, oh, are you kidding me? And that's what I like about Bronn. Bronn is like that person that never gets what he wants, but he does so much for people. We kind of see that there's a tradition now being brought a little bit to the Lannisters, because Bronn is asked to kill the brothers of Cersei. So we have Tyrion, and I'm thinking he's alluding to Jaime too. So, and the creepy part is the crossbow is the crossbow that killed Tywin.
Yeah.
So we're kind of getting that traditional feel of Bronn even states it. He's just like, oh, really? Like, with this? And he's like, if you want me to kill this dragon queen, I don't think I can do this, but, and so that's the main thing that we're going to see at King's Landing is Bronn now has to go murder these 2.
Well,
and he actually states, he's like, I hate working for these people because, they give me a castle and a wife, and guess what? They took it from me. And then, the Maester's like, well, she paid up front. So he kind of is like, ooh, he's that character that's all about gold and rich and fame. So
I'm really excited for this. There's a little things that, I feel differently about. So he was hired to kill both Tyrion and Jaime, both who he has spent multiple time in eras with. So I definitely feel as if, this is kind of this is a great character arc for him, because he has, for this whole time, has just been fighting completely for money. And now he's fighting, he has to kill the 2 people who have given him probably the most, and who have also been with him the closest friends he's had. And so this will be a character thing that he has to choose to take the money and the lands and everything that he wants, or not. And there's some there's definitely fear in my head, because I'm like, if Bronn does this, he goes from being a super loved and well-liked character to possibly one of the most notorious characters, because he holds up to what he actually is someone who just loves money. But if he doesn't do it, then he'll become such a adored character and have such one of the great arcs that people are going to be like, this is fantastic, I love it. But of course, I feel like Game of Thrones doesn't end that way, and that normal thing. But I don't think that he'll kill them, but I could be wrong. He could kill one of them. I don't know. He could just wound them. I don't know. But it definitely was one of those interactions where I was like, that is such a great character driving point that I am excited to see where that goes, and probably the most excited thing that I find in King's Landing. After that, we see the Gold Company, which I personally am still kind of like, if they play them wrong, I'll be upset. Because the Gold Company was created from Targaryen of the Blackfires leaving, going across the ocean to like kind of build up an army to hopefully return, and then just ultimately became missionaries. But they still have the blood of the Targaryen in them, and so they would also like kind of hate the Baratheons, as well as they would hate like other ones. They would want the crown, not to work for the crown. But they're very loyal to any job that they do, so I can understand the two fights between that. On top of that, we also get Theon coming back for his sister and rescuing her. Again, another reunion that I knew was going to happen, and they basically just like made it really quickly. They didn't show it as if like a big battle took place. They just sneak in, got her out. And then she basically tells Theon like, hey, I know that we're supposed to go to Winterfell, but I think we should go back to our home and retake it and have a place that the queen can come back to, somewhere where the dead can't get to. And this is something I pointed out to the people I was watching, and I got really frustrated with, is all the bad decisions people are making, it's because they don't understand the power of the White Walkers. Because they think just because they're across the ocean, the White Walkers can't come. Well, the problem is that the White Walkers bring never-ending winter. And in winter, if it's never-ending, that has plenty of time to freeze up all that water. Especially if it gets like below freezing, like way below freezing. Like I get there's salt in that water, but with enough, like if it's cold enough, it will freeze over. And I think that's what's going to happen if they stay there. The white,
or they would starve them out because there'd be no livestock.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
you know,
it's just like a matter of time. People are doing what they think is right, but the problem is just it's not correct when you're dealing with this type of threat. John's approach is kind of correct. You need to make a line in the sand and give everything you got into one thing, because if you take down the king, you basically stop the whole horde, and that's what he has to hope for. So that's basically King's Landing. I don't think there's anything else below the neck, so we can go ahead and start bringing this into the landing.
The only thing that I want to bring up is the main focus of Theon and his sister talking.
Okay.
Was, she's like, we want to let's go back to our place and do that. And he's like, I don't think so, my lady, and la la la. And you're my queen, I'll fight you. And she's like, you need to go to Winterfell. You want to fight for the Starks, you go to Winterfell. So Theon is going to Winterfell, I think so.
Yeah, well, he's definitely like showing his like bringing up of Starkness over like the Pike side of him, because like her initial extent is like, hey, let's like this feud between us is more important, let's go and claim our house and then we'll figure out from there. Why Theon's like, no, we have our duty to our king, we should do that. And I think that's something that's good, but I don't know what's going to happen. Theon has a problem of caving to his sister, but his sister also has a problem of not getting people behind her because she's a woman. So yeah. So now let's go ahead and head back up to the north.
The
Winterfell with Sam and Daenerys. And then after Sam and Daenerys, we'll go to Sam and Jon, and then to Bran and our special guest. So Austin, go ahead and talk us through Sam and Daenerys, my bad.
So this is a pretty great scene, I'll say that. Whoever plays Sam, hats off to you, man. It was very believable.
Yeah.
The thing is, Daenerys goes to the library or the crypt or whatever that is. I think it's just a library.
It's the Maester's quarters.
Yeah, the Maester quarter. And she meets Sam, the one that has cured Grayscale, from Jorah, or Jorah Mormon. And, he's like, hey, this is the guy that cured me, and he's a great guy, and like blah, 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 and she's like, well, for your good deeds, I'll let you, I will be you'll be part of my citadel and, stuff like that. And he's like, can I ask you for like a favor? And she's like, yeah, go ahead. And he's like, I stole some books from the citadel. When he said that, I just started laughing. But then I was like, there's still some other things. And then I was like, what about the sword? And then he was like, yeah, I also stole a sword by my family.
And I like her reaction. She's like, from the Citadel? And he's like, no, from my family. It's been the Tarly line forever. And then that's when I was like, yep, here it comes.
Yeah, so Sam finds out that his dad, his father, and his brother, his dad didn't like Sam at all, but Sam loved his brother. Mm-hmm. And what happened is they didn't want to side with Daenerys and ended up being executed. Mm-hmm. And you can tell why I liked whoever the actor is that played Sam, played him great, because when he hears that his dad's died, he's like, kind of. But then he was like, well, that's fine, my brother. And it's like, your brother stood with your father. And it crushes Sam. Yeah. Because Sam's like so tight with his brother that he's just like, oh, this is soul crushing. And it gets to a point where it gets to him so bad that he's like, may I leave? She's like, of course. And Daenerys plays it off as she has no emotion. And Jorah, or however you pronounce his name.
No, you got it right.
Kind of. Oh, did I? Finally. I'm really bad at character names. He actually, you can tell that he's a little upset about what happened. But overall, we find out that Sam's kind of family's dead.
Yeah, outside of his mom and Gillian and all that. Which, the one thing I want to point out about...
Little Sam.
The one thing I want to point out, about this... this interaction is, like you said, it's funny that she came in there to congratulate him and to thank him and give him something for returning this guy, and then she ultimately leaves with oh, I wanted to bring you such a great gift. Your family's dead, sorry. But I will agree. See, where you said you got choked up over Jon and Arya, this is where I choked up when he started crying about his getting kind of choked up about his dad. I was like, oh, there's so much worse, dude. I know that you really liked your brother. And then he's like, well, at least I can go home to my brother. I'm like, oh, no. And when he started, sniffling, I started tearing up because I'm just like, man, this guy killed this. This is fantastic. Great play. And then he went out of the room. And, Jorah, you could tell him, he was sad, but he still sticks by Daenerys. And then Daenerys is like, I don't know what to do. I gave them an option, and they chose not to. And it definitely shows the parallel. And he brings it up with Jon about Jon is strict and hard in the north, and so is Daenerys. But Jon understands compassion and mercy, and Daenerys doesn't. And that is something that I think is going to bring up later in that. But that was an amazing scene. I'm going to remember that for a while. It's definitely one of the best scenes with Sam in it. I think it's one of his... best acted scenes, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So, then let's go on to actually.
Well, one last thing about this. So he walks outside. I just have to state, when we were talking before in the episode about creepy Brand, there's creepy Brand just standing outside staring at Sam.
Like I said, every time he's there, it's like every time someone interacts, Bran's there observing. Because to them, they just think, oh, he's doing nothing but sitting there. But they have to understand that's all he does now, is he just watches the world. And I think that makes him no better, such a great character because of how he's playing. He's almost like us viewers, just sitting there watching everything. And then whenever they're aware of it, they're like, oh crap, dude, this person's just watching us. And it's just yes.
That's it. You heard it here, folks. The NerdWatch has cracked the code. This is exactly what Game of Thrones is. Bran Stark is one of us. He's just a normal viewer, and he's just trying to spoil everything for everyone.
He's just trying to get back to his real world. And he's just, at this point,
he spaceballed us. He spaceballed us. He went in the future and
yeah.
He bought the future of DVDs. So,
yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to Sam and John. It needs to be talked about. We still forgot one more thing that we need to talk about. We'll talk about it at the end because it's a great segue into predictions for next time. So, Sam and John.
Okay.
So, when it comes to Sam and John, it interacted exactly how I expected it. Because I knew that Sam would bring it up, and the second he started talking, I'm like, he's going to talk about his family. Yeah, and it's just one of those things that I knew that whenever he would talk to John, the first thing he would do is bring up his family. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Is he just started talking about, like, you know, she murdered him, she killed him. He's like, I've killed people who disobeyed me too. He's like, yeah, but you've also shown mercy to your enemies. And that's the thing. That makes me think that Daenerys, if she survives, she's not going to be a love queen. Like, she doesn't have the compassion of a queen. She has the anger of a mad king, like you said. But John has the compassion of a king. And I think ultimately it's going to come down to if John and Daenerys both live and they marry and they become become king and queen, that is going to be the ultimate combo. But if one of them goes down, I don't think either of them will become king or queen, unless John is the only one who lives. But ultimately, then John gets spoiled about Rhaegar and Lyanna. And the after episode, people talked, and they were kind of like, yeah, you know, he knows that this stuff is true, and he tries to, like, defend it against. I'm like, I don't know. I get you're the writer, so whatever you say goes. But I think kind of in John's point of view is, like, he can't, like, this is such weird information to him. He doesn't have any basis for this. He doesn't know about the Tower of Love or the stuff like that to understand how this could happen. He just understands that Lyanna got, like, taken away by Rhaegar, and then that was it. And hearing that he's the son of Lyanna and Rhaegar, he's like, oh, you know, father's been lying this whole time. The more important thing is that not only would Ned be lying, but so would, like, the whole kingdom of the Baratheons would be dethroned at that point once they found out that Rhaegar didn't kidnap her, but instead, like, married her. But then there would be a whole nother problem with the Sept about marrying multiple people because they hate that. So I don't know. There's a lot of stuff there, but ultimately you see John, like, hearing that, and there was, like, a weird change in the lighting during that scene whenever they hear about, like him being a Targaryen, like, the lights kind of went bluer or whatever. And so that was interesting. I'm going to have to rewatch the scene because it was a very powerful scene, and a couple of the people in the room were talking a little bit about it and, like, screaming and all that stuff because it was a bunch of fangirls. But definitely a powerful scene. What about you?
So I kind of had this theory on it where what leads up to that is, like, you know, him being told is Bran talks to Sam and says, it's time. It's time. You have to tell him. I can't. You have to tell him. He's like, but he's your brother. And he's like, he's not my brother.
Yeah.
I think, like, I don't know, like, this just popped in my head and right after the episode ended, and I really think that Bran knew that Daenerys was going down to tell Sam that his family was killed. The reasoning why, and it was by her, because the thing is Sam having that response to John, it had to happen where Daenerys told him that his Tarly dad and brother was murdered. He wouldn't have reacted that way because now he knows injustice that she's done to him, you know, and he's seen John's justice and what he has done. And, you know, I think that Bran for Sam was like, this has to happen. So I think Bran knows exactly what needs to happen to get where it needs to be. But I would say it was a really good scene. I was happy because now we don't have to wait around to be like, when is he ever going to find out that he's a Targaryen? Yeah. They abruptly did it in the first episode, which I hate Reddit so much because this episode got leaked a while ago, and then it got leaked again today from DirecTV. And I usually read fan theories because Game of Thrones is great for fan theories because it's a lot of fun. And someone spoiled me and told me that this was going to happen this episode, which, it didn't really spoil me because I knew it was going to happen sooner or later. I just didn't know when. But it was pretty spot on spoiled. He said it was in the Crypts of Winterfell, and it was Sam that told him about it. And I was like, oh, yep, this was pretty spoiled. Luckily, I didn't read anything further because I would have probably been spoiled the rest of the episode. But I liked that finally we can now realize that, and Jon realizes that he's a Targaryen. So.
Yeah, which all that comes full circle for that reason. There's not much more to talk about Jon and Sam, other than definitely Jon is basically telling him hey, you should be the king, not her. And that's definitely going to cause some dissension, but Jon's smart enough to know that, if I would become king, it would be to second of a queen at this point, or the queen not being alive or whatever, which he's not going to say that out loud because he doesn't want the North to try to revolt and kill her. But let's go ahead and quench that and go on to the finisher of the episode itself.
Actually, can we rewind just a minute? There is something we did miss. And it was a key part of the episode. It was just a small part, and we can talk about it real quick, is Tommen and the whole scene about him going to...
I wanted to say for the actual, I mentioned before that we skipped something. That's why I wanted to talk, because that is a perfect lead into next episode predictions. So we're on the same page, but let's...
Good.
Cool.
Good. Okay, so...
Cool. Bran and Jaime, because not much goes on here. It's just Jaime entering into Winterfell, gets off his horse, kind of looks around, and then he locks eyes with Bran. So nothing huge there.
And then credits roll
because that's the one that everyone wanted to see. It was also funny because the end of that first episode that this one is supposed to parallel to is a scene between Jaime and Bran. And then they end this episode in a scene between Jaime and Bran. So that was something that I enjoyed. And honestly, that's all that we know so far. So we can go into what we think that will lead to during our next episode predictions. But like you were going to say, you can go ahead and talk about is we had Tormund Giantbane. You constantly call him something else. That's fine. And Beric Dondarrion. Beric Dondarrion entering into the Night's Watch. We're not really sure which castle it is. That could be Castle Black. I think it's Castle Black because of the person they meet. But go ahead and tell us. Go ahead and tell us what happened.
They enter in to figure out what happened to the little commander that they took and said, hey, you can get your horses that you need to get your people back here. And, they're just going in, and then they hear this little, of course you're going to freak out. You're like, And of course, deep down, I was like, yeah, they're going to find someone that they know. It kind of set up that way. And what was it? The Night's Watch. It was, I don't remember that character's name, but he's actually, I think he's the Lord and Commander now.
Yeah, he's the Lord. He's the Lord Commander now because when Jon leaves, he kind of gives his thing. He's like, my watch has ended.
My watch.
And he was the one who had it, and you just had that feeling like, hey, you're the Lord Commander now. Deal with it.
Yeah, so we got this happening. They're like, did you find anyone? And of course, a lot of people are dead. And we see this symbol once again.
The spiral symbol.
These symbols it's like a spiral symbol, and it was made out of human parts. And of course, in the middle of it was the little Lord Commander.
No, the little kid of the Umbers, which now that I think about it, I don't know why I thought it was the Night's Watch. I think it's because me and the guys were talking. We thought it was the Night's Watch before that came, and for some reason in my brain, I still thought it was the Night's Watch. It was. I think it's the Umbers' hometown area.
And of course, they're like, we need, how long is it going to take us to get back to Winterfell? Because this is close. Yeah. The Night King did this and he's here. And of course, when he says that, little boy comes alive and Mr. Flaming Swordsman comes up and he's like, he's like 4,000 damage.
I mean, I think he only has 21
straight
damage,
up,
but 21,000, but 2,100.
But whatever. Yeah. It straight up just does some flaming bull crap and barbecues that little kid that's already dead. And in this world, when you kill a White Walker, I believe that the Greyjoys say it the best: is what is dead will never die. But this time it was wrong. So it actually killed the dead thing, and it actually engulfed the rest of the body parts that was assembled.
Yeah, definitely like trying to show off the whole emblem itself.
It kind of reminded me of like Daredevil, the Ben Affleck. Yeah. I put my D's here, but like it kind of reminded me of something like that.
Yeah, it definitely was like a simple thing. I knew that whenever he started to catch him on fire, I'm like, the whole thing's going to catch on fire. It's going to be like a whole like ooh ah thingy. But yeah, that's basically what happened. So we get the Night's Watch to be introduced to Winterfell. So next episode they'll probably end up getting down there along with Tormund, which we see in the kind of like next episode trailer that they do. But yeah, let's go ahead, and that's basically the whole episode. We kind of jumped around a lot, but that's basically the whole episode of what we thought was super important or things we wanted to talk about. So let's go ahead and start kind of tipping off the end of this. And Austin, do you have any predictions for next episode? Just next episode. How you think it's going to play out? What's going to happen?
I think that we're actually going to see a couple things, and this could be complete spoilers, people. So if you are listening to this, listen at your own risk. I sometimes dabble in the dark arts, and I look through the future. I get my DeLorean, and I've already seen the future, like Bran Stark. No, I'm just kidding. These are complete just theories that I have, I have on top of my head. But watching the next episode preview, I actually believe that, we're going to see the fight sooner than what we thought. Because I actually thought that the fight maybe would start around like episode 4 or 5, and then 6 would be like the conclusion of everything. But I think, without a doubt, I think now my theory that I do believe in, how it's going to end, is one step closer to being fulfilled. The other thing is I really think what's going to happen is the fight's going to happen, and the Lannisters are going to show up, and they're going to kill the people of Winterfell. Like, I just feel that this is how it's being set up, because she's kind of, she talked about, Sansa even said, did you trust, I thought that you were a clever man, and, I can't believe you trusted Cersei. And my theory, I think, is Cersei's going to send up a certain army up there to murder those people, get Bran to try to murder Jaime and Tyrion. And I think they're going to fall back to Pike. And, well, I think that's the name of that, or the Iron Islands. And they're going to fall back to that. I really think that my other theory is the person that does sit on the throne, which we'll talk about that later. But I think that we're going to see here a lot of cool character development. I can't wait to see the reaction and the talk that Jaime and Bran's going to have. Because the last time that we saw Jaime and Bran together, Jaime was kind of getting, his freak on with Cersei and ended up crippling Bran Stark. Mm-hmm. So, we haven't, those are one of the reactions that have been waiting since like season 1. Yeah. So, and I actually think, after a while, I've really been thinking about this, but I think I might change my prediction on Azor Ahai just because on this episode that's coming up. And I think I might put Jaime's hat in the ring here, because I've been thinking a lot about, what Azor Ahai has to be, and some of the things are adding up now. So we'll see. But I think this episode we're going to see a fight. We're going to see them get ready for it. And it's going to be full winter third episode. So we'll see.
All right. Well, For my personal predictions, I think that they're going to basically lead off with the Bran and Jamie kind of reunion. It's not going to be super long. And I think it's going to ultimately come down to like Bran being like, hey, I was mad about it, but now I don't really care. We don't have time to fight over such bitter things, and you're here. And honestly, I know Jamie has always been in the ring for possibly being Azor Ahai, and I forget what all Azor Ahai has to do. But the idea of Jamie being the Kingslayer could be completely full circle about him being the Night Kingslayer as well. So who knows? I'm not going to worry about that. That's for farther on. I personally think that the Nightwalker part is going to be ended by episode maybe 3 or 4. I don't think it's going to be drawn out super long, because I think if they make it like episode 5 when it ends, and then episode like 6, because there's only 6 episodes, right? Or is there 7? I can't remember. But if they only have 1 episode of epilogue, it's not going to be long enough to like finish everything, because they not only have to finish off the White Walker, they also have to finish off King's Landing, and there's a whole thing going on there that just it's going to not do it justice if they just resolve it at that point. But I think what's going to happen next episode is they're going to get told about the White Walkers are on their way. And I think the episode, there's going to be a lot of like little things on there, probably more additional like reunion / getting prepared. And I think a small battle will happen. If a battle happens, I think it's going to end with Winterfell being taken and everyone in Winterfell rushing down to the neck and basically running away. That's if a battle happens. If Asami kind of thinks that what's going to happen is it's going to get down to like the last minute is going to be them appearing at Winterfell, and then that's the end of the episode. And then the next episode is going to be like a Battle of the Bastard things, where the whole episode is going to be a huge combat deal, and then the end is going to be them retreating. And so that's my thought process, and we'll see how that goes. Austin, I like to do these things. I used to do them all the time back before I did this podcast with you. I used to make articles on a website called Odyssey about Game of Thrones. I used to do a death prediction of the highest percent person you think of who will die next episode. I did this during the Battle of the Bastards, and I put Song or whatever his name is, the giant, as the number giant. 1 in that thing. And I was, of course, right, because I knew that he was too powerful. So I have for you, Austin, I only want one character who you think is your highest chance to die next episode. And I want you to say like your percentage of if they'll die or not. So it's not saying that this person has a 100% chance to die. It's saying that this person has a high chance to die. The highest that you think in the series. So you go. Who you think is your highest person?
Right now, the next death that I think that's going to happen, and if we're going with just the next death, I would have to state probably. It's a really good one. I'm trying to think. I'm going to throw out probably Jorah Mormont.
Okay.
Just because I want to see that shock and awe value, and I know how much he loves Daenerys, but he's kind of crowding up the Jon Snow-Daenerys love triangle thing. So I think if the battle's about to happen, he's going to be one of the people that's going to die. I think he's going to be because, I think there's too much coolness right now. So someone has to die. And I think he's someone that actually could die, and it wouldn't be that big of a factor in probably the storytelling that's going to be told later. Unless, game theory guy is right and thinks that he's actually a Jorah High. And maybe he is, maybe he's not. But I don't think, I really think that. Now, main character that I think that might die first, probably, I'm going to go with, I'm going to go with a heavy hitter here. I'm going to go with Jon Snow. The reasoning why is, no, not Jon Snow. What am I thinking? I'm being stupid right now. I'm thinking you know, we do these podcasts at like 12:30 at night, so like my brain's kind of like, main character wise, I think Arya is pretty close. I think she's going to be the one. She's going to die definitely, I think, in this show. You know, the only people that I ever really see surviving the show is probably the Hound, Brienne of Tarth. Probably there's something there with Brienne. And Jaime Lannister, I think, will survive. And Tyrion, too. So, but I think actually here soon, I'm thinking probably Arya Stark's going to be the most popular person to die. So
okay, well, for me, next episode, I don't see a lot of people dying. If there's no combat, like if it ends the episode with the White Walkers appearing, I don't think there's going to be really any big death. If they try to go for like a shock death, they may try to kill off Jaime, and he probably has like, I would say, probably a 30% to 40% chance of dying next episode, because they did the whole trailer within. It's like, we talked about how you killed my father and all this stuff and how you would die. And I think that's going to be a parallel of that. But it's going to be like a parallel of the Littlefinger thing. However, I don't think that will happen. I think he's going to basically be told, like, yeah, you're not going to be killed, but you're going to fight on the line. And if you die in there, then so be it. And so, like, if there is battle, I think we're going to have a number of deaths. I think we're going to have a lot of the B rank characters, which B rank is anyone from like the Hound to Beric Dondarrion to Gendry. Like, I think there's going to be maybe like one or two. When it comes to any of the characters, I think, honestly, I don't see any of them dying yet. I really don't want Tormund to die, but he's probably on the highest list of people who could die and not have significant kill. Like, it would be sad because I love Tormund, and then Brienne is also in that level, but there's a side of me that wants to say that Brienne is Azor Ahai, but there's no real conquest to that. I just want that. So that's my death prediction. I think Jaime has the highest chance of dying if there is no combat. If there is a combat, I think only a B rank character will die. I don't think any A rank characters will die. So I really think that next episode is going to have little to no deaths, personally, in my opinion. So that's basically what we have for this week of NerdsWatch. Austin, is there anything you want to say before we head out?
A couple things. Just if you guys love things that are nerdy, classy, Classy Nerd Talk community, we have a Facebook page. Just, you know, we're just, you know, we love interacting with people. Right now, remember, if you do join the community and if you do put a Game of Thrones spoilers, you are completely banned. But a lot of cool interactive community, and we're active completely. There's people that post every single day there on Classy Nerd Talk community on Facebook. You can check us out on other social medias. You know, you're listening to this podcast right now. We have other podcasts too, so you know, definitely check those out. And just a shout out to GhoulGaming.com. They do wonderful T-shirts and other nerdy art stuff. And if you use the code GhoulGaming4, you'll get 10% off of your order. And there's always 2-day free shipping because, you know, you got to compete in the world of Amazon. Yeah. So, and if you get anything from the Classy Nerd Talk selection, if you use the code Classy Nerd Talk VIP, you'll get 12% off. So, you know, pretty cool stuff. I've already bought a shirt there. They got some Game of Thrones T-shirts there too. So, you know, one of my favorite Game of Thrones T-shirt, which I have bought, is Crows Before Hoes. So,
okay.
But yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. And as always, I am one of your main hosts, Josiah, and as always, my brother Austin, who is the leader of Classy Nerd Talk. Till then, I hope you guys a long and safe night. Till next time we meet next week. Till then, bye.